Greetings and welcome to a new edition of Rowdy Reads. And this time we've got a very special version for you. I promise you that we will eventually get back to some of the Worlds of Power series because I definitely want to more of them. But for now, we're going to go into another type of game adaptation story. As for the next few episodes, we're going to be reading stories from the King's Quest Companion. Now, on the chance you might not know what all this is about, the King's Quest series was a series of PC adventure games created by Roberta Williams back around in the 1980s or so. It is the story of the King Graham family and their adventures of both becoming the royal family and the evil threats that stop them. If you can, both Paul Dugan and Pushing Up Roses have released their own video series reviewing each of the major games, the 7 that were total in the series, and they probably even, I think, eventually went into the one we don't talk about, the 8th one, which that's talking about even more. But, and they probably briefly brought up this book as well. The book was published by Peter Spear, and it serves as both, the very creative thing about these books is, I think there were 4 versions that came out eventually. I'm currently holding the 2nd edition, is that these books both were served as both not only a how-to guide for the games themselves, but also went so far as to novelize each of the games. And if you haven't, if you want to know just really how crazy this book series can be summarized, I highly recommend checking out David Ganassel's video, where he talks about this book in very more detail. He did not grow up, obviously he got the book much later in life. Now, my family and I, we got these books as part of playing the original games, as many of them were released. We didn't do them in order. King's Quest 3 was the first. We eventually got to the others in due time. But I am going to say, just to show you kind of exactly how crazy this book is, I'm going to actually read the foreword in the first chapter, which is not involved. It does not involve one of the actual games themselves, to fully help you show just how uber meta, maybe that's not the right word, but just what they did to justify this whole book series and make it one of the most unique versions of any type of player's guide you will ever see in your life. So let's go and just begin with that right now. So I'm just going to start with this first, Squid. The gnome's name is Ifnkov Grogherperm, but lately he's also been answering to the name Nick Stilts-Eltsmer. Of course, he only does that for certain people. You might be one of those people. Again, you might not. There is a way out of the maze in Mordak's castle. Just one, but it's there. All you have to do is discover which of the 64 different places it's located in and how to get to it. And it's possible to survive the endless desert of Serenia. You just have to know where to look for the few oases and safe spots that are there, and one important skeleton. There are maps for both of those mazes in this book. You'll probably need them. Oh, Daventry is a real place! I hope all of that got your attention. The rest is just summarizing the games themselves. We're going to move on to, that was just the most important part of the Read Me First opener. Now, we go to the introduction, where this goes much more in detail as to what the writer meant when he said, Daventry is a real place. How I came into the possession of these documents is a mystery for which I have no answer. Words and sentences, paragraphs and pages that cannot and should not exist in the last clock ticks of the millennium glow back at me. I keep telling myself that this is the final decade of the 20th century, that we still live in an age of reason, a highly technological, scientific era where anything unexplained will have a rational explanation. If not today, then any time now. Real soon, I hope. I can describe the physical manifestations of the process, and I can read the words that are its end product. They flicker across my computer's monitor no differently than if I had typed them there myself or had received them from one of the many electronic mail or electronic online services to which I subscribe. But I've checked with those services also, and they cannot confirm any messages or mail transmitted to me at the times in question. I knock on glass. Yep, they're still there. The mundane and the fantastical, crawling up and down the screen like some Kafkaesque bug. Because the context is so ordinary, a finger-smudged Macintosh monitor in an unfinished garage office, the unimaginable becomes metamorphosed into something more comprehensible, something almost normal. Almost normal, but very, very strange. A much wiser person than myself once observed that the universe is not stranger than we imagine, but stranger than we can imagine. Astronomers and theoretical physicists reprove this adage with disturbing regularity. As soon as we learn that the speed of light is an upper limit that nothing can reach, much less exceed, we are told of the existence of particles that cannot move slower than light. It is also explained that the universe is uncounted billions of expanding light years across, and would take billions of years to cross even if we could travel at light speed. Then we learn that there might be shortcuts through all that space, by way of stellar wormholes or some such. Shortcuts through what? Whatever wonders the mind can conceive, the universe will have stranger ones hidden away, just waiting to stub someone's toe. Wonders upon wonders, puzzlements within puzzlements. We live, it seems, in the universe of the cosmic giggle. In Daventry, one of the great principles of magic states, nothing is as it appears. Keep that in mind as I tell you the following story. In late 1984, I was working as a writer and producer for a television station in San Francisco. One of the projects I worked on was a multi-part series about the 10th anniversary of the home computer. In the course of research, I began contacting the many publishers of computer entertainment software. The computer game market had crashed a few years earlier. The product was the same, but the euphemism was different. It was in this context that I talked to John Williams, the head of marketing at a small company called Sierra Online, located somewhere between Yosemite National Park and Fresno, California. John told me Sierra was about to publish a new game that would revolutionize computer adventures. I had heard that line before, so I politely asked John to send it to me along with some stuff I was more interested in, forgot it, finished packing my bags, and headed out with a reporter and camera crew to cover the famine in Ethiopia, the real world. The game that was waiting for me when I arrived back from Africa was King's Quest. Not King's Quest 1, not Quest for the Crown. It was just plain vanilla King's Quest. It sure was unique. If you weren't into computers or computer games back then, you might not recall that computer adventure games, as opposed to fantasy role-playing games such as Wizardry or The Bard's Tale, were divided into two broad types: text adventures, no pictures, and graphic adventures, words and static pictures. King's Quest was an animated adventure. Its hero, Sir Graham, walked, jumped, swam, climbed, fell, fought, and got chased much like a character in a Saturday morning cartoon. Cartoons, however, are passive. You just sit there and watch, and maybe jeer, cheer, or talk back. You don't just veg out with King's Quest. You become Graham. You control his actions, share his adventures, ponder his problems, and suffer his fates. Set in a land filled with monsters, magic, and fantastic creatures, King's Quest takes on its own life. Right from the start, people became hooked on Graham and Daventry, and the game became a runaway hit. As for myself, I played it a bit, and then put the fantasy world away to plunge again into the real world of television, news, and computers. Years and sequels followed. King's Quest became, and still is, one of the most successful series of computer games ever published. Unlike many other games that people buy, the digital reality that is the world of Daventry kept hold, and kept holding on. For many, the line between fantasy and reality blurs a bit. Graham, Gwydion, Valanice, Rosella, Manannan, Lalote, Edgar, Genesta, Mordak, and Cedric became real. Colima, the Land of the Clouds, Ludor, the Shipwreck Island, Dracula's Castle, Tamir, the Dark Forest, and Mordak's Island seem real places. How do you get to the Land of the Clouds? How do you get off the Shipwreck Island? And how do you get out of Mordak's maze? It's all good, clean, problem-solving fun. There are puzzles, perils, and predicaments. All the ingredients for a hit game, and all the ingredients for a reality, just as John Williams had predicted in the game's inception. I smiled, smug, and told people how I remembered when, but I didn't mention I had heard the line before. In late 1988, I moved on to producing and writing a television show about personal computers called The Computer Show. While we seldom covered entertainment software, I became, more by elimination more than anything else, I fear, the entertainment editor for the program. One week we aired a brief segment on Roberta Williams, the creator and author of the King's Quest series. Roberta had been traveling around the country visiting shopping malls and bookstores to autograph copies of her latest King's Quest adventure, and she was sometimes getting mobbed. Since this is not your everyday occurrence, we covered one of her stops, and she and I spoke about it when we met in Las Vegas a few months later. During the conversation, Roberta talked about the land of her creation in a way that vaguely hinted the stories were not all fiction, that perhaps there might be more to Daventry than just imagination. She never came out and said anything specific. I may even be amplifying nothing into something via retrospect, but her body language, her choice of words, the set of her head and that certain stare said, "Pay attention, stupid! I can only say so much. Read between my words and read between the lines if you know what I mean." Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Her statements carried the possibility of a second meaning. They all hinted at a reality, a universe so fantastic that I barely gave it even a first thought, much less a second. In fact, it all went by so fast that I didn't even think about it again until after my computer started acting funny. I started getting electronic mail from Daventry. Normally, I turn my computer off at night. Normally, I don't imagine things mysteriously showing up on my computer screen, sent to me by a fellow journalist in another universe. The first time it happened, I assumed I hadn't turned off my Mac, and that somehow a computer virus or flu or something has caused the machine to dial into a bulletin board, which in turn had sent back the purported delivery from Daventry. It had to be part of an elaborate hacker's hoax. I just happened to be one of the innocent victims. I checked it out. I checked it out a couple of times. No virus. It was strange, I agree, but I chose to ignore the incident and forget about it. After the second incident several weeks later, I decided that someone was breaking into my office at night and that the prank was somewhat more personal. I changed the locks on the office and double-checked that the windows were shut and secure. After the third time, I confronted my more computer-literate friends, neighbors, and occasional co-workers. Everyone denied knowledge. I have no reason to disbelieve them. Few of them, I suspect, have much talent in the field of breaking and entering. I never got any messages if I unplugged the computer before locking up, but I did receive them if I only unplugged my modem. I finally decided, hoax or not, to get into the spirit of the mystery, collect what appeared, and to just See where I ended up. So far, I've ended up here, both feet firmly touching ground. The problem is that each foot seems to be in a different world. Daventry could really exist. Several of the messages I have received talk about how their universe withdrew from ours through the use of magical forces, driven by the desire of the various more fantastical inhabitants to exist, apart from the scoffing of an increasingly rational and scientific world. That which cannot be weighed, measured, or stuffed inside the laws of thermodynamics used its own curious, but no less effective laws to escape. And where they escaped to, whether another universe or another physical dimension, is a place that our own scientific theories say is entirely plausible. One explanation put forth by a number of reputable scientists argues that there exists in reality an unknown number of different universes. These could be even thought of as different regions of the same universe, but in either case, theory allows for these pocket universes to have their own unique sets of the laws of science and nature. Another theory states that the universe is not made up of individual particles, like atoms or electrons, but instead is composed of strings. Strange things that are long, but not high or wide, and have no other dimension. This theory only makes scientific sense, however, if our universe has more than the 4 dimensions to which we're accustomed. 26 dimensions is one number given. The reason we don't see these extra dimensions is that they're all folded up on themselves, but they are there, nonetheless. Could these also be pocket universes? Is this what Alexander of Daventry means when he writes of the multiverse? Is Daventry one of these pocket universes? What I have really collected in this book are a number of documents of varied types: histories, press clippings, maps, a magazine article, and the like, all selected from scores of messages I have received from the one who signs himself Derek Karlavagen. If you believe their content, and I would like to, then you will come to see the truth of the incredible reality that Roberta Williams may have hinted about that January afternoon in Nevada. What we see, buy, and play under the disguise of games are actual histories translated into the medium of the computer game. If played successfully to the end, you get an almost exact transcription of what, supposedly, actually happened to the people involved. Reality or fantasy? Roberta Williams says she gets her ideas from myths, fairy tales, and her own imagination. She'll give you a funny look if you suggest Daventry as a physical reality. Fact or fiction? Get a copy of King's Quest III to Air is Human. Look at the bookshelves on Manannan's study. Notice what appears to be a computer screen sitting on one of the shelves. Derek Karlavagen says he found a metal head there that he now uses to communicate with us, one he has been using for some time that he calls the Eye Between the Worlds. Has Roberta Williams been getting the same messages as I have, silently appearing on her computer screen from where our universes touch? Or is she a great dreamer, one who travels between the worlds in sleep? Derek thinks the wall between our worlds is so thin that we can sometimes dream each other. Truth or hoax? I cannot rule out the latter. Many people in this world believe that the more elaborate the ruse, the more satisfying the joke. It may very well be that I am being played for a fool. That's why this book is being published as a companion to some computer fantasy adventure games. A book of clues and solutions, an aid and reference work for people who like to spend their time trying to figure out how to escape from inside a whale or off a desert island, steal from a fire-breathing dragon, talk to mermaids, save their father's life, rescue their family, defeat wicked witches and evil wizards, win a kingdom, or win the hand of a kidnapped princess. Harmless fantasies and adventures they all are. Fantasies that live only in the flickering light of the computer screen and breathe only in the imaginations of their players. Seen in that light, it's all rather really clean and simple. On the other hand, So that's the author's original introduction. So next we'll go to the first chapter of the book itself, which is titled The Eye Between the Worlds, compiled from messages to this world from the world of Daventry as sent by Derek Carlavagen. Prepare yourselves. This is where the weird and insane really begins. Greetings and salutations from the world you probably never suspected existed. It is a place where sudden violence and death are never far distant, where the magical, mystical, and fantastic are commonplace, and where the greatest rewards come from bravery and cunning, not from killing. It is a realm where human and not-so-human folk spend their lives free from the constraints of disbelief. It is a place where anything is possible, and everything could be true. We have no name for our world, our universe, but you may call it Daventry if you like. We think of it as home. My name is Derek Carlavagen. I am a writer here, scribing stories about the current events of the day, which are then published for the information and amusement of whoever cares to read them. I study the magical arts daily, and while I am not so practiced as to pass myself off as a professional sorcerer, I have achieved enough proficiency to have attempted to contact your world. I suspect an explanation is in order. We here in Daventry are your own descendants, the sons of your sons and the daughters of your daughters from generations and centuries back. And that's just the human folk. We are also your dreams and nightmares, your myths, legends, and stories. We are the reality that much of humanity has rejected over time. The unicorns, the centaurs, and demigods. We are the other races of beings who evolved alongside humanity, the dwarfs, elves, gnomes, giants, and fairies. We are the users of the magic that you say does not and cannot exist. We are the truth behind what you dismiss as mere legend, and we are the flesh that became your fairy tales. Once you could see the other creatures that shared your world. Once you too could create ointments of invisibility. Once you too could talk with the animals, and they would talk back. And once you too could mount a winged horse and fight the dragons of the earth. Now you say that if you cannot see, feel, touch, hold, measure, dissect, count, smell, taste, deduce, or duplicate something, it cannot be real. If you cannot find its bones, it never existed. You see yourselves as the center of the universe, the focus of all creation, and you see that it is good. In doing so, you miss much. When the universe was younger, and humanity less proud, giants did roam the earth, and magic kept the forces of chaos and darkness at bay. All of the races of the earth struggled for their survival, sometimes together, sometimes against each other. In time, it was the human folk who proved strongest, both by the force of their magics and the number of their people. Uneasy peace existed for millennia as humans moved from their caves and their forests to build their first cities. The places they deserted, the wild and free places, were left to the others. As the centuries passed, more and more of humanity condensed into its cities and towns, and the passing years saw less and less of the dwarfs and elves and other beings. Humanity was fruitful and spread its masses over more and more of the earth, squeezing the dragons and unicorns and other creatures into smaller and smaller places, remote from humans. As human folk saw less and less of these beings and creatures, they began to say that they did not exist, and that the stories told of them and their deeds and adventures were myth, legend, folklore, and fairy story. As human folk built more and more across the world, they began to place more and more faith in their numbers and philosophies and technologies than they did in magic and nature. The world went out of balance. Magic, like mathematics, needs faith and belief to operate properly. Walled away in cities and towns, isolated from the natural world by roofs and ledgers, magic was scoffed at and dismissed as fantasy and deception. In time, humanity came to not only reject the magical, strange, unique, and different, but to fear and condemn them. True, in some areas, belief did not go entirely away. True, many of the other folk and creatures of the world survived, hidden in their secret places. And true, some did continue to practice their magical craft. But the weight of disbelief was upon them, and like ripe grain at harvest time, they could see the thrashers coming. To survive, we withdrew. As the centuries passed, it became apparent to our ancestors that much of reality, the irrational and magical, was doomed to extinction. They had knowledge of the passing of the lizard folk, who had owned the earth and roamed the stars, before the evolution of the mammals that would become humanity. Our ancestors did not choose to follow those creatures into oblivion. A great conclave was called, a meeting between the representatives of all the colors of magic and all the kinds of little folk. Fairies and elves and demigods were there, as were the special folk who watched over the more magical creatures. They decided that their only chance for survival was to find a new home, far away from the swaggering, doubting human folk, not just out of their sight, but outside of their constrained reality. All differences were to be put aside, and all efforts were to be made to create, through the use of magic, invocation, and elemental powers, an entirely new universe, far away from that of humans. In time, the spells were forged as we learned how to create our own reality, our own new world. It was a one-way path. Once gone, it would be impossible to return, for the natural laws would not allow it. Always forward, never back, is one of the elements in the spellcasting. For that reason, not all chose to withdraw. Many also wished to remain for other reasons, and no one was forced to go. Most went then, the good and the evil, safe and dangerous, big and small, magical, fabulous, and ordinary. A complete world was populated in an instant with beasts and monsters, and all the different kind of folk. In some cases, even the homes and possessions of the more powerful were transported. As a result of that first great migration, cataclysms tore at the earth. Earthquakes rocked, and volcanoes spat their lava into the sky. Such were the forces needed to withdraw so many. Where those first folk went, and where I live now, is as real and solid as your world, the one we call the other world. It exists as just one universe amid infinite others, in the greater reality of, for want of a better name, the multiverse. Daventry exists just over your shoulder, if you could only turn around fast enough to see it. I sit writing this to you just around the corner of an eye blink. We are so close that you sometimes dream of us, as we do of you. And that is why I send you these messages. Many other times over the centuries have folk withdrawn from your universe, forced to escape as the rational world fenced them tighter and forgave their differences less. Great eruptions and earthquakes are the signs of their passing. It is your great loss and our great gain, for over the millennium, each new withdrawal gives us fresh life and new wonders. Always we reinvent ourselves, because in our world of magic, everything is possible. As you have rejected it, all magic eventually comes here. Which finally brings me to the rest of the explanation I promised. As I have said, I am an investigator and writer of contemporary events, who hobbies in magic and travels much. Some time ago, after having talked to and written at length about Prince Alexander of Daventry's escape from lifelong captivity and his subsequent rescue of his sister and kingdom from the terror of a fire-breathing dragon, that was a lot, wasn't it? I decided to visit the scenes of the prince's adventures in order to better understand what the brave youth had been through. It was for this reason that I, at length, arrived at the house of the wizard Manannan, whom Alexander had turned into a cat. No cat, though, was to be found any place there. The house was in good repair, but no personal animal was anywhere near. I resolved then to spend some days there, using it as my base for my explorations around Ludor. At night, I took advantage of Manannan's large library, looking closely through his books on magic and magical lore. The days stretched into weeks, and still no one came to claim the large house with its well-stocked underground laboratory. It was during this time that I discovered the eye between the worlds. There is a lever set into one of the library's bookcases that opens up the trap door into the secret lab. On a shelf nearby, I discovered a most curious object. It looks much like a metal head, but with only one very large glass eye, and an open jaw containing near 100 teeth. Each of these teeth has a letter, number, or symbol inscribed upon it. This thing must have been made by Manannan or some other very great sorcerer, for when I pressed a certain tooth, light appeared to fill the eye. Moreover, when I touched on other teeth, words would magically appear on the eye's glass surface. Wondrous indeed was this thing that I soon came to see as a talking head, and think of as the eye between the worlds. Yes, it did talk, and it still does, not with sounds, but with words that crawl across it, and with pictures that draw themselves from before my very eyes. After much experimentation, I found that I could make my thoughts and words appear on the eye's surface. The thing is a machine, to be sure, although how it works I do not know, for it has no parts which move. I have said before that our universes, our worlds, are so far apart that we can never touch, and so close that we can sometimes even dream of each other. We know a little about your world, and because folk still withdraw from there to here, although not so very often anymore. They bring us stories and histories and descriptions, which we record for all who might be interested to read. Not many do. The other world holds few charms for us. You, on the other hand, know nothing of us except what your dreamers dream, and that you reject and dismiss as fantasy. The fact remains, however, that the walls between the worlds are thin enough to let folks pass through in one direction, and thoughts and dreams to sometimes pass in both. The eye in Manannan's study is a hole in those walls through which dreams journey. I am a curious soul. I have read the records concerning your world and know as much about it as any here in Daventry. Because of this, I soon came to realize that much of what appeared in the eye of that mechanical head came from the other world. Somehow, in this strangest of multiverses, our worlds touch together in a place shared by this head in this study and certain of your machines. My story might have ended there except for that curiosity of mine. One night, tapping upon the teeth with no particular purpose in mind, I was astounded to find mention of Daventry and King Graham's adventures. Apparently they exist in your world as a sort of fantasy adventure, a made-up story intended as an entertainment for people. Again, our worlds are so very close that we can sometimes dream each other, and even turn those dreams into stories. This must be true, for I have seen the evidence with my own eyes, transmitted back from the other world. Who the dreamer is that could learn enough to concoct these stories is unknown to me, although the person must be a very great dreamer. I have experimented for much time now with the eye between the worlds, and I am convinced that I can send messages directly to you through it. Perhaps that is why the wizard contrived it. To talk to your world. Or perhaps to recruit allies who he could help withdraw here so that he and his evil family might rule cruelly over our entire universe. On the other hand, Manannan might just have been as curious as I am. I do not know if what I write here will ever arrive in the other world, but I think I have figured out what to do to send the words on their way. I have nothing to lose, of course, and for you who discover this, perhaps I will have provided some wonder, knowledge, and enjoyment. To that end, I will continue my solitary experiments and copy for you some of the histories and narratives of my time. Since there are those in your world who are somewhat familiar with King Graham, I shall send you on this night and others, some of the chronicles of his court, stories of the adventures of the king and his family. You might compare them to the stories that have been written. Perhaps I will write of other things as the mood strikes me, or perhaps I will just copy some interesting words of others. I will do all of this over some time, and more than once. Your world could learn much from us of the wonder, mystery, and magic of the multiverse. Maybe you could learn again that anything is possible, and everything could be true. Perhaps you will learn to believe in your dreams. That there is the supposed explanation as to how Peter Spear obtained information provided by one Mr. Derek Karlavagen that the world of King's Quest actually does exist in some other parallel universe. And before you scoff about this idea that beings of magic and fantasy once lived in our world, our universe, and withdrew to another plane at some point in time, keep in mind, this isn't the only place where I saw/read about such a theory. You may recall a few years back I reviewed the TV miniseries Merlin, which of course is based off of the legends of King Arthur. And that version of the Arthurian legend was established by suggesting that magical beings were coming to extinction largely because humanity was starting to no longer believe in magic. Pretty much the very same theory provided in this book, and the source of why Karlavagen's ancestors chose to withdraw to another universe to ensure their own survival. Coincidence? Who knows? But as they say here, maybe anything is possible. Next time, we shall begin the first story of the first novelization of the King's Quest adventures. What supposedly was the actual original adventure of the real King Graham. Stay rowdy, my friends.